Listen to me. I want you to take a deep breath right now and feel every ounce of air rush into your lungs. That breath is a reminder. You are alive, and there is a purpose behind your life. Maybe you've been fighting a silent battle, feeling like every day is an upward climb with no relief in sight. Maybe your faith has wavered, your hope has been tested, and your strength feels dangerously close to empty. But I'm here to tell you there is a God who sees your struggle. There is a God who knows your pain. There is a God who fights for you even when you're too wary to fight for yourself. The question is, do you see his hands in your situation? Do you recognize the signs that God is on the battlefield of your life right now? I believe the reason you're here in this very moment is because you sense there's more to your journey than the heartbreak, doubt, or frustration you've been living with. Deep in your spirit, there's a stirring that says, don't give up. It's that gentle whisper reminding you that you're not in this alone. When we talk about God fighting our battles, we're talking about the divine grace that steps in when human effort has reached its limit. We're talking about supernatural provisions that show up when your back is against the wall. We're talking about life-shifting moments that can only be explained by something greater than ourselves. I know some of you might be on the brink of despair. You've tried everything you can. You've pushed forward, knocked on doors, prayed desperate prayers in the dead of night, and still you feel stuck. You're wondering if heaven has turned a deaf ear. You're questioning whether you're important enough for a miracle. Here, God hears every cry. God sees every tear. Sometimes the signs that he's working on our behalf aren't the flashy lightning bolts we expect. Sometimes they're subtle shifts that point us toward the rescue we so desperately need. The challenge is that in our chaos, in our stress, we can miss the very evidence of his intervention. In a world that glorifies independence, it can feel uncomfortable to accept that we need a power beyond ourselves. We're taught to hustle. We're taught to grind. We're told that only the strong survive. But the paradox is this: often in our vulnerability, in our openness to divine help, we find a strength that is unshakable. It's the type of strength that doesn't come from mere willpower. It comes from understanding that we are not alone, that we are supported by a force so loving it would never abandon us in our hour of need. Tonight, I want you to consider the possibility that some of your greatest life transitions, your biggest breakthroughs, have come from moments when you surrendered your fight to God's hands. Think back to those times when you thought you couldn't make it, but somehow a door opened or a way was made. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a sign. And that's what we're diving into, 7 signs that God is fighting your battles for you. Not might fight. Not maybe will fight. But is actively, powerfully, unquestionably waging war on your behalf right now. Ask yourself, what if the circumstances you're going through are actually stepping stones? What if the delays and disappointments are part of a divine strategy to elevate you to a place you never even imagined? What if, in the midst of chaos, God is orchestrating a symphony of grace that will drown out the noise of your fear? That's the lens through which I want you to listen tonight. Because once you see these signs, once you recognize God's footprints in your journey, you start living with a hope that defies every obstacle. You stand taller, speak bolder, and love deeper because you know the victory is already won. Now, we're going to walk through 7 key signs. 7 ways to discern that God is not just on the sidelines, but right in the trenches with you. Each sign will sharpen your perception and fortify your faith. By the end of this, I want you to walk away with renewed fire in your spirit. Not because the battles disappeared overnight, but because you finally see who's been fighting for you all along. So get ready. This is not a feel-good talk. This is a life-changing revelation if you're willing to let it sink in. God is on the move. God is fighting for you. And once you realize that, there's no army on earth or in the heavens that can stand in your way. The first thing that often indicates God's is fighting your battles is those moments when doors slam shut and you're left wondering why your best efforts didn't yield success. That can feel frustrating. That can feel confusing. But it can also be a sign of divine redirection. Maybe you were pushing towards something that wasn't meant for you. Maybe the closed door was actually God's hand, protecting you from a future you couldn't see. The frustration of a missed opportunity can transform into the clarity of a better path. I remember a time when I was absolutely certain I needed a specific role, a specific platform. I poured my heart and soul into getting it. But the door stayed locked. I thought I was failing, but in reality, God was saving me for something more significant. And when that new door opened, it led me to a place where my gifts could flourish beyond my wildest dreams. That's what I mean when I say a closed door can be the first sign. Because when you see rejections as redirections, you realize God's perspective is bigger than your immediate desire. Sure, it hurts when you're denied. Sure, it stings when your plans go up in smoke. But it's in that very pain that you might discover an outcome far better than the one you wanted. Sometimes we get attached to our plan. We think if I just push harder, if I just hustle more, I'll force this into reality. But what if forcing it is the exact opposite of faith? What if faith is trusting that if one path is blocked, there's a higher path available? You can miss this sign if you keep obsessing over the past, if you keep blaming yourself, if you keep questioning your worth. A closed door is not a condemnation of your value. It's an indication of your future. If you misinterpret it as failure, you might stay stuck in disappointment. But when you interpret it as a divine pivot, you awaken to new possibilities. You start looking around, searching for what else God might be placing before you. And in that search, you position yourself to receive the better blessing. Now, how do you identify when a closed door is God's doing? Start by praying for discernment. Ask for wisdom. Look for confirmation in other areas of your life. Little signs that keep nudging you forward in a different direction. Sometimes the people around you will reflect this too. Friends will say, maybe you should consider this new path. Or you'll stumble upon an unexpected resource that lines up perfectly with a different opportunity. When these layers of confirmation come together, you know God is orchestrating a shift. The solution is to let go of your stubborn attachment to what you thought was best. Release the outcome you envision. Open yourself up to the new. It might be scary. It might be uncomfortable. But courage grows in the face of uncertainty. You don't need all the answers. You just need enough faith to take the next step. When you do, you'll find that God has been preparing a place for you, a blessing tailor-made for who you are becoming. And what is the lesson here? Sometimes losing out is actually winning more. Sometimes not getting your wish is the exact miracle you need. It's a sign that God is fighting the hidden battles, preventing you from stepping into pitfalls you never saw coming. This doesn't mean every disappointment is a divine intervention, but it often means we should look deeper. Are we being spared? Are we being guided? The moment we see closed doors as part of God's strategy, we walk with greater confidence. We realize that we're not simply victims of circumstances, we're beneficiaries of divine alignment. And that, my friend, is a powerful position to be in. The next sign that God is fighting your battles can look like unexpected peace. Have you ever been in a storm that should have destroyed you emotionally, and yet somehow you found a quiet place in your spirit? That's no accident. That's not your natural wiring. That's what I call peace that surpasses understanding. And it's often a direct result of God stepping into your situation. When the night is darkest and worry keeps pounding at your door, the presence of unexplainable calm is a potent sign that you are not fighting alone. I remember sitting by a hospital bed, hearing the beeping machines, facing the possibility of losing someone dear to me. By all accounts, I should have been undone. Yet, something in me refused to let fear dominate. It was as if a warm assurance wrapped itself around my heart, whispering, "It will be okay." That whisper didn't guarantee a specific outcome. It didn't promise that everything would go according to my hopes. But it did promise that no matter what happened, I would be held. That's divine peace. That's the kind of peace that signals God is on the battlefield, shielding your mind from despair and your heart from collapse. If you're not paying attention, you might miss this sign. You might write it off as denial or emotional numbness. But ask yourself, is it really numbness or is it grace? Is it really denial or is it a supernatural stillness that allows you to face the unfaceable? Because when you have that peace, you can think more clearly. You can make decisions that aren't driven by panic or anxiety. You can find moments of joy even when the world says you have every reason to be miserable. That's not normal. That's extraordinary. And that's a sure sign God is at work. You might be wondering, how do I cultivate that peace? Start by acknowledging your limits. Sometimes the biggest barrier to God's peace is our insistence on controlling every aspect of our situation. Let me say it straight. You are not God. You can't dictate every outcome. You can't carry every burden on your shoulders. Accepting your human limitations opens the door for divine intervention. And once you invite God to do what only God can do, you free yourself from the pressure to fix the unfixable. If you ignore this sign, if you push away that gentle calm, you might end up drowning in needless stress. You might find yourself locked in cycles of anxiety, losing sleep, and damaging relationships because you can't find the off switch in your mind. But when you embrace the peace When you accept it as a gift, you discover you're more resilient than you ever realized. You stand firm, not because you're oblivious, but because you're grounded in a truth bigger than your circumstances. The key lesson here is that peace is not the absence of the storm. It's the presence of God in the storm. And when God is present, the winds and waves may not immediately cease, but they can't break you. Your spirit remains intact, your perspective stays sharp, and your heart remains open to the hope of a new day. That unexplainable peace is the clarion call that God is fighting your battles, neutralizing the enemy of fear, and strengthening you from the inside out. It's the beacon that keeps you steady when everything else is shaking. Don't dismiss it. Don't underestimate it. Recognize it as one of the most beautiful signs that victory is on the horizon. Moving on. Another sign that God is fighting your battles is when help arrives in unexpected forms. Maybe you find yourself facing a mountain of debt, and suddenly out of nowhere, a job opportunity lands in your lap. Maybe you're wrestling with loneliness, and an old friend reconnects just when you need support the most. These aren't random accidents. They're often tangible expressions of God's provision. Sometimes you won't even realize you needed that kind of help until it shows up. But once it does, it becomes clear that something beyond coincidence is at play. I recall a time I felt utterly isolated, carrying burdens I was too proud to share. One day, I ran into a colleague who simply asked, "Hey, how are you?" Really? And I cracked open. I spilled everything on my heart, and to my amazement, that person had gone through a similar valley. They had resources, connections, and insights that opened a door I never knew existed. That conversation changed the course of my struggle. It was more than chance. It was orchestrated grace. Yet we often hesitate to accept help. We might feel guilty, unworthy, or too independent. Let me challenge you, don't let your pride be the reason you miss out on a blessing. God works through people, through opportunities, through even the simplest acts of kindness. If your eyes are closed, you'll walk right past the lifeline. If you keep trying to do it all on your own, you might block the very miracle you've been praying for. To recognize this sign, you need to be humble enough to see that you can't fight every battle solo. Pay attention to patterns of synchronicity, moments that line up so perfectly you couldn't have planned them if you tried. Listen to the still, small voice telling you to pick up the phone, to send that email, to start that conversation. Each of these nudges could be the key to unlocking God's tangible assistance. When doors open that you didn't even know to knock on, don't brush it off as luck. Consider the possibility that it's divine favor. The cost of overlooking this sign is staggering. You could remain stuck even though a path to freedom is right in front of you. You could carry weights you were never intended to carry alone. God's army often shows up dressed in everyday clothes. Friends, mentors, colleagues, even strangers. They might provide resources, words of wisdom, or simply a comforting presence. When you see it for what it is, God's way of saying, "I've got you," it boosts your courage. It reassures you that you are truly cared for, not just by the people around you, but by the heavenly orchestrating your steps. What's the lesson here? Being open to help is a critical act of faith. It says, I trust that I'm part of something bigger, that I'm not isolated in this struggle. When you adopt that mindset, you'll find that the help you receive often surpasses your expectations. It meets needs you didn't know you had. It solves problems you couldn't articulate. That is God fighting for you in real time, making sure you have the resources, the allies, and the encouragement to keep pressing forward. Lean into it. Embrace it. Let it transform the way you navigate life's battles. Another strong sign that God is fighting for you is a newfound wisdom or insight that flips your perspective. Maybe you've been stuck in a pattern or a mindset for years, and suddenly there's a shift. You understand something you didn't before. You see a situation from a higher vantage point, and that clarity changes your entire approach. Wisdom doesn't just materialize out of thin air. Often it's granted in response to your willingness to seek truth and remain teachable. I've seen this in my own life. I was wrestling with deep resentment towards someone who wronged me. Every logical fiber in my being said I had a right to be angry. But the anger was consuming me. It was turning me into a bitter person. I prayed, God, help me see this differently. Slowly, insights began to surface. I started to see the brokenness behind that person's actions. I recognized that I was harming myself by holding on to resentment. That shift didn't come from a self-help book alone. It was a divine intervention in my mind. Once I grabbed hold of that wisdom, it set me free from a prison of negativity. How do you know if this shift is from God? Often, it comes with a sense of peace and moral clarity. It's not just about intellectual understanding. It's about a heartfelt revelation that aligns with principles of love, truth, and growth. You see solutions where you once only saw problems. You develop compassion where you once harbored animosity. You adopt strategies that break cycles of self-sabotage. This is a clear sign that God is fighting your battles by helping you fight your own inner wars. Wars of perception, wars of mindset. If you ignore this revelation, if you push it aside, you risk stagnating. You risk circling the same mountain of frustration over and over because you refuse to adopt the perspective that could free you. Change often starts from the inside out. God can open external doors all day, but if your mind remains locked, you won't walk through them. You'll stay bound by your limited viewpoint. That's the tragedy of missed wisdom. So, what's the takeaway? Treasure those moments of clarity. Write them down. Reflect on them. Put them into action. Don't let them fade under the demands of daily life. These insights are battle tactics straight from the divine. They're the strategic maneuvers that help you outsmart your adversaries, whether those adversaries are external challenges or internal limitations. When wisdom arrives, it's like receiving the blueprint for the next stage of your journey. Hold on to it. Study it. Let it guide your steps. That's how you partner with God in the fight, by leveraging the insights He places within you. Now, let's talk about a sign that's a bit more dramatic, miraculous turnarounds. You've tried everything. You've prayed, you've planned, you've prepared, and still you're pinned to the ground by the weight of your challenges. Then, in what seems like the final hour, something shifts. A medical report changes, a lawsuit settles, a threat disappears, or a financial crisis becomes solvable with resources you never expected. That's a defining moment where God's hand is almost undeniable. I remember a family who was about to lose their home. They had exhausted all their savings, sold belongings, and still came up short. It was the 11th hour. Then, out of nowhere, a relative they hadn't been in contact with for years reached out, offering assistance. It covered just enough of the mortgage to stop the foreclosure. When I asked them how they felt, they described it as witnessing a miracle. They felt God's presence in the timing, in the exactness of the help, in the relief that arrived at the brink of despair. Yes, cynics might say it's luck, but when this kind of rescue happens repeatedly in your life, you begin to see the pattern. You begin to sense that there's a divine source orchestrating events. You might think, why wait until the last moment? Because sometimes in that final hour, our humility is at its highest. Our pride is stripped away, and we're most receptive to the lesson or the blessing God wants to give us. We realize how desperately we need grace, not just for that crisis, but for our very breath. If you refuse to see these turnarounds as divine, you rob yourself of the gratitude and all that strengthen your faith. You also miss the chance to share your testimony, to encourage others who might be in the same pit. Seeing God's intervention for what it is can turn you into a lighthouse for someone else walking the same dark path. How do you position yourself for miraculous turnarounds? You keep the door of faith open. You keep doing what you can, but you also leave room for what only God can do. It's a delicate dance of work hard, but don't worship the work. Plan thoroughly, but remember your plans are not the final word. Expect good outcomes, but remain flexible enough to see when God wants to exceed your expectations. And when the miracle arrives, acknowledge it. Don't write it off or hide it. Lift it up. Let it fuel your future battles with confidence, reminding you that no matter how dire things look, God has a track record of showing up right on time. Another key sign God is fighting your battles is the experience of supernatural strength when you're physically and emotionally exhausted. Have you ever found yourself doing more than you thought possible? Maybe you're juggling multiple responsibilities, work, family, community, and you're sure you can't carry on another day. Yet you wake up and somehow you keep going. People look at you and ask, how are you doing it? And your only honest answer is, I don't know, but by the grace of God. I've felt this while preparing for roles that demanded mental rigor and emotional fortitude. I was running on fumes, doubting my ability to keep performing at my best. But each day brought a fresh supply of endurance, a reservoir of energy I couldn't explain. I truly believed that was God equipping me for the assignment. The same can be true in your life. Whether it's caring for a sick loved one around the clock, or persevering through a season of relentless hardship, there comes a point where human energy isn't enough. That's where divine empowerment steps in. Missing this sign can lead to burnout because you might attribute all your strength to your own willpower and keep pushing until you collapse. But recognizing divine strength means you approach challenges with an awareness that you're well is being filled by a source greater than yourself. It allows you to pace your life in a healthier way, to tap into prayer and reflection as means of replenishment. One practical way to harness this supernatural strength is through moments of intentional pause. Even if it's just a few minutes a day, get quiet, breathe, and acknowledge, God, I need you. In that stillness, you invite God's sustaining power to flow. It might sound simplistic, but it's incredibly powerful. There's a reason so many people testify to the rejuvenating effects of prayer, worship, or meditation. It's during those times that your spirit aligns with the source of all strength. The lesson is that your limitations don't have to be your endpoint. They can be your launch pad. When you reach the edge of your capacity, God steps in if you let Him. Recognize that moment and humbly ask for what you need. Don't push yourself past the brink alone. Yes, work diligently. Yes, give your best effort. But also remember, you were never meant to operate as a solitary warrior. You have a divine ally whose power is limitless. When you tap into that, battles that once appeared insurmountable shrink before your eyes, and you move forward with a quiet, confident resilience that can't be explained by your own strength alone. Finally, one of the most profound signs God is fighting your battles is a transformation in your heart, a shift in your character that reflects deeper faith, patience, and love. You see, sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones we see on the outside. They're the ones taking place on the inside. Maybe you've grown in forgiveness toward those who've hurt you. Maybe you've developed patience in areas where you once had none. Or you've cultivated an unshakable faith that remains steady even under pressure. These internal shifts often point to God's hand molding you, training you to become the person you were designed to be. One woman I know struggled with anger issues for years. She'd lose her temper at the slightest provocation. Then she entered a season of intense challenge, a tough job, a rocky relationship, financial stress. In that crucible, she began to pray earnestly for patience. Over time, she noticed her reactions changing. Situations that would have set her off before somehow didn't. She was calmer, kinder, more aware of her words. By the end of that season, she realized that the real battle wasn't the external chaos. It was the battle over her character. And God had fought for her by giving her the grace to change from the inside out. If you overlook this sign, you may conclude that hardship is pointless suffering. But when you notice how trials refine your spirit, you realize that God uses battles as training grounds for virtues that last a lifetime. Adversity can become the fertile soil where faith blossoms and love matures. This doesn't mean God causes every hardship. It means He can redeem every hardship. He can turn pain into purpose, conflict into character development. To truly benefit from this transformation, pay attention to your reactions and emotions during trials. Are you becoming more compassionate, more self-controlled, more hopeful? These shifts are not random. They're indications that God's grace is active in your life. You can reinforce these changes by journaling your progress, sharing your journey with trusted friends, or simply pausing each day to recognize how you're evolving. The more you acknowledge these inner victories, the more they will grow. And so we come full circle All these signs, closed doors that lead to better paths, peace in the storm, help arriving in unexpected ways, newfound wisdom, miraculous turnaround, supernatural strength, and inner transformation are evidence of God's presence on your battlefield. They serve as reminders that you're not alone, that your struggles have meaning, and that your victories are already taking shape, sometimes in the most surprising ways. Now, let's pull it all together. We've navigated through closed doors that might have felt like failures, but turned into blessings in disguise. We've stepped into unexplainable peace that defies chaos. We've welcomed help from unexpected places, understanding that no man or woman is meant to fight alone. We've witnessed how wisdom can shift our perspectives, unlocking solutions that our limited thinking never could. We've seen miraculous turnarounds that arrive precisely when human hope runs dry. We've relied on supernatural strength when our own reservoirs were depleted. And we've recognized that sometimes the greatest victories unfold within us, transforming our character and our faith from the inside out. All of these experiences point to one overarching truth. You are not walking through life by chance. There's a loving, mighty, compassionate God orchestrating events, strategically placing people, and stirring revelations that shape your destiny for good. When we talk about God fighting your battles, it's not some abstract idea. It's real, and it manifests in tangible, life-altering ways. You might be thinking back over your own journey right now, identifying moments that once confused or hurt you, but now make sense under this perspective. You might realize that He was there all along, intervening in ways you couldn't have imagined. So what do we do with all this knowledge? First, we remember. We keep these signs close to our hearts, especially when the next wave of adversity tries to knock us down. You have to anchor yourself in what you know to be true, even if your emotions are screaming otherwise. Second, we stay vigilant. Don't get complacent. Don't drift into thinking you've got it all handled now. Spiritual battles are ongoing, and your awareness is a critical line of defense. Third, we share. If you've seen God fight for you, don't keep it to yourself. There's someone else who's drowning in hopelessness, someone else who's blind to the signs of grace all around them. Be the voice that says, "Hey, I've been where you are, and let me tell you what happened." Testimony ignites faith. Next, we take action. Maybe you've recognized a closed door, but haven't moved on to find the open one. Maybe you've sensed unexplainable peace, but haven't allowed it to change your posture toward life. Perhaps help arrived, but you were too proud or too afraid to fully accept it. Or you received new wisdom, but haven't implemented it. Maybe you witnessed a miracle, but chalked it up to good luck. Or you've relied on supernatural strength, but kept pushing until burnout because you never paused to rest in God's renewal. Or you felt your heart transforming, but haven't celebrated or nurtured that growth. This is your call to move, to respond, to lean into the battle differently, knowing you have a divine ally who never leaves your side. When you act on these signs, really lean into them, they become stepping stones. Each sign you embrace catapults you further along your path, growing your faith, building your resilience, and expanding your capacity for love and service. You become a living testimony, a beacon of what it means to walk with God, to trust in something greater than your own strength or intellect. You'll start to see synchronicities everywhere you go. Problems that once paralyzed you suddenly seem solvable. That's because you're no longer dragging the weight of doubt. You're no longer fighting a battle you believe is yours alone. Instead, you fight with the confidence of one who is backed by the King of Kings. Reflect on each sign. Picture them like lights guiding you through a dark tunnel. One by one, they illuminate your path, showing you that even in the darkest moments, God's presence is real. If you ever lose your way, come back to these signs. Revisit the times you felt rescued, the times peace defied logic, the times help appeared, the times wisdom arrived right on time, the times miracles happened when you least expected, the time strength came when you were sure you had nothing left, and the times your own soul shifted toward the light. These are not random fragments of your past. They are chapters in a grand narrative of love and redemption. And let me tell you something else. The story is still being written. No matter how many battles you've faced, there will be new challenges on the horizon. But armed with this knowledge, with this evidence that God fights for you, you will not face them as the same person who stood at the foot of the last mountain. You'll face them with courage, with an unshackable faith that says, I've seen what God can do, and I believe He'll do it again. That's the type of resolve that can topple giants. That's the type of certainty that can calm even the fiercest storm. When you wake up tomorrow, I want you to walk with a new posture, shoulders back, head high, heart steady. Speak to yourself, I am not alone. I am not abandoned. God is with me, and He is fighting for me. Let that truth pulse through your veins, fueling you with the energy to keep moving, keep believing, keep loving, because the battles will rage on, but they are not unconquerable. And you, my friend, are not a mere spectator. You're a warrior equipped with divine power that most of the world has yet to fathom. So, rise up. Don't let fear talk you out of your destiny. Don't let disappointment anchor you to past defeats. Don't let cynicism rob you of wonder. Remember the 7 signs we explored and let them transform your daily walk. At every closed door, be open to a better opportunity. In every storm, look for that unexplainable peace. When help knocks, open the door. When new wisdom dawns, apply it immediately. Anticipate miraculous turnarounds, however small, however large. When you feel weak, tap into the supernatural strength that God freely offers. And as your heart transforms, celebrate it, because that inward change might be the single greatest sign of all. Understand that fighting your battles doesn't mean you'll never feel pain, never face loss, or never experience heartbreak. It means you're wrapped in a divine assurance that even those hardships serve a higher purpose. You will be tested. Yes. You might be pressed on every side, but you won't be crushed. You might be perplexed, but you won't be driven to despair. You might be knocked down, but you will rise again, because the power sustaining you is infinitely greater than any force trying to break you. Carry that truth into your relationships, into your workplace, into your dreams and your struggles. Let it guide how you interact with others, how you take risks, how you forgive, how you love, and how you dare to hope. Because if God is fighting for you, truly nothing can stand against you. Not permanently, not ultimately. The victory is secured not by your own might, but by his unwavering commitment to you. And finally, let your life testify to this reality. Let your story ring out, showing that behind every scar is a lesson. Behind every tear is a moment of growth, and behind every obstacle is an opportunity for God to show himself faithful. You are a living canvas where God's grace paints a masterpiece of resilience, courage, and unbreakable hope. That's the power of seeing, believing, and living out the signs that God is fighting your battles. You were never meant to do this alone, and now you know you don't have to. Step forward, warrior. The greatest chapters of your story are yet to be written, and God's pen is already in motion. Keep your eyes open, keep your heart humble, and watch in awe as God continues to fight for you, leading you from victory to victory, from glory to glory, one sign at a time.